Yeah, that's the big dog hunt. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Kallas and Marks. Your host, Joe Staszak, my man right there, Steve Kallas. Steve, I'm back on Philadelphia soil. I've had time to heal a little bit. I watched replay the game, which I didn't think I'd do this soon or ever. I was going to take an eternal pass, but here we are. In the interest of professionalism, I reviewed a lot of the plays I couldn't really see too well or have access to replays at my own behest. So I've done all that. And my conclusion is they lost 38-35. That's pretty much what happened. Let's start with the holding call. I did see that a couple times on replay before because that's what everyone was showing. You know, my position hasn't changed on it. There is some talk that has surfaced, and I know players do this a lot, but Mahomes and Juju had complained to the officials during the game about the Eagles grabbing, clutching, and sometimes a squeaky wheel, gets the oil. I don't know. I know Mahomes, Juju Smith, his body language was nothing after the play. After the holding play, he was earlier, like you mentioned, on a play that was incomplete. Right. And one of their few punts resulted in a punt. He was, bitching and moaning. But Mahomes on that play started pointing right away. And I don't know, maybe refs are human. I don't like them. I've made that clear. I don't like them at all, ever, any of them. And I know that's a general sweeping statement, but it's because they do stuff like this and become the story instead of staying out of the way, maybe being influenced by it. Okay, fine. Yes, you've been complaining all game. It was a tug. So, again, by the letter of the law, it was a penalty. But I know Darius Slay came out with it was either a TikTok or a tweet that says, we're taught to do that. And they are. I mean, anyone who doesn't know that and doesn't follow it that closely, it happens a lot on every play. There's a lot of clutching and grabbing going on. What can I say? It took the Eagles' last chance opportunity away from everyone to see what Jalen Hurts would have done. I firmly believe they would have gotten at least 3 out of it. There wasn't as much time as I thought before Sirianni called a timeout. After Jericho went slid at the 1 or 2 yard line, but they did burn about 7 more seconds off, and that can be, somewhat of a difference. Hurts did slip on the last throw, which would have been nice to at least see if he could have gotten, anything could happen. I'd like to see how that would have played out, but again, that's such a long shot. But yeah, he did slip. It wasn't, he had a problem with an injury or anything. I don't believe, because he was throwing bombs all game. Quez Watkins was a drop. He was, you're right, the defender got to him a little early. They weren't calling it. They weren't calling much. I was okay with him not calling that there. I think Quez still should have come up with the ball. But final thoughts are those so far. Did you see anything or hear anything or any chance to reassemble your thoughts? Because this is our final. These will be probably our final thoughts on Super Bowl 50.
Well, it's pretty much the same. The ref on the 15-yard line, where the tug and the grab and the whatever you want to call it took place, he was standing right there. He didn't throw a flag. Guy who threw the flag was 15 yards away in the end zone. The tug actually happened on like the 14-yard line.
Yep.
He's 15 yards away, and when you watch the replay, when they showed it in slow motion, the flag isn't even thrown until the 2 guys are in the end zone. They're still 6 yards from the ball. Or 7 yards from the ball, but they didn't throw it till then. So 58 minutes, nothing. We went through the penalties in the second half. 1 delay a game against the Eagles, 1 offside against the Eagles, 1 holding call against the Eagles. It's still a mystery to me. And this is not about Eagles fans. A lot of people, the Eagles fans are coming. No. This is about getting the opportunity to make it the greatest Super Bowl ever.
Mm-hmm.
If he goes down the field and ties it up, and whoever wins in overtime without one of these calls, it's one of the greatest Super Bowls ever. And now it's going to be the holding call Super Bowl. And so I don't know why they changed it after 58 minutes. Maybe you're right. I didn't know that they were complaining during the game. But again, Juju Smith-Schuster over the middle on that one where Bradbury grabbed him, he's jumping up and down. He's complaining. He's looking at the refs. He's doing the throw the flag thing. And then in this last play, what did he do? He did nothing.
Ball was uncatchable. I could not have caught that ball anyway.
You know right. What I mean? Well, Mahomes says, and Mahomes is being diplomatic. You're right, because he pointed right away. People think he threw it there because he knew it was already a hold. and he didn't get the call from the guy in the 15-yard line, but he threw it to the spot, he said afterwards. Well, I don't know. Did you see him grab? Did you see him get, did you take a peek at him before he ran the route? Because it was all the same way.
Right.
So I don't know. I just say it's very disappointing and very surprising because this was a let him play game. 58 minutes, no pass interference, except the one where there was the blocking downfield, which they call it pass interference. I think they should just call it illegal block. They call that pass interference when the guy runs down too early and blocks before the guy catches the pass. Fine, but that's not what we know as holding or real pass interference. And, you know, I will say this, though, if you could challenge, remember that one year, although that was a holding call, if you could challenge any play and you challenge that play, they would uphold that play because there was a hold. But I'll say it again, the guy in the 15 didn't call it. The guy 15 yards away. And the best thing I heard totally was Rob Ninkovich, former Patriot, saying, why are the Patriots wearing green gloves when they're tackling guys in white jerseys?
Eagles.
And if you look at Bradbury on the replay, Bradbury had white long sleeves on, but he had a green glove. It stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah,
it did. And I really believe, again, this is beyond refereeing and everything else, but I really believe if he was wearing a white glove and did that tug, I don't think the guy 15 yards away in the end zone could see it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be white on white.
Right.
So they're going to have to talk to the trainers or whoever picks their gloves. But I just think it was a terrible way to end. You know, a lot of people are saying, oh, I wish they hadn't called it. I think they shouldn't have called it because of the way the game was called.
No, I totally agree on that. I got to give props to Greg Olson, the color guy, former Carolina Panther, former Chicago Bear, former Miami Hurricane, because after the penalty, and he did not believe it was a penalty. He disagreed with Mike Pereira, who was basically saying, yeah, you got to call that it was a tug. That's fine. And he said, if the Kansas City Chiefs, no, I believe, actually, no, I apologize. It was before the penalty. It was 3rd and 7 from the 15. He said, if they do get a first down here or break one open, slide, just get down. This is before they did it. Now, you know, he's thinking ahead. That's good. Me, I could go both ways on this. I remember the Super Bowl 2011, Ahmad Bradshaw on the last drive on the Mario Manningham, that catch touchdown drive by the Giants. He had an opportunity to go in with a little over a minute left, I think. I think Eli was telling him, no, fall, and he fell forward for a touchdown. You know, it's hard to not take the lead when you have an opportunity and leave it up to your kicker, despite it's pretty much an automatic from there. But I've seen things happen. Tony Romo, remember him dropping the snap. Tommy Hutton also did that, an Eagle holder a long time ago in Dallas. That's how we remember that one. It was a regular season game, but it happens. But Ahmad Bradshaw scored. They didn't want to give Tom Brady too much time. Turned out it worked out for them because they made a stop. Jericho goes down, which even when he was running, Olson's like, get down. He did. I was impressed by Greg Olson on that one. But anyway, yes, it was unfortunate. I'll go back to a couple plays that we talked about. The Devontae Smith catch or not catch. I don't think they look at it and say, is there indisputable evidence? I think they look at it with a clean slate and say, what is this? What actually happened? I don't know if they necessarily think, is it incontrovertible? What's the word? Indisputable.
Incontrovertible. Yeah.
Thank you. Or indisputable evidence.
Indisputable.
I don't have that much. I could have gone either way on that. I know it was called a catch, so maybe, but I'm looking at it from a clean slate blank. One, I thought he double clutched. When I saw it live, he was coming right at me. I thought he double clutched. He did double clutch, and when he had possession, it wasn't the helmet catch, but close. I'm not sure if he only had 1 foot in, but that's not what they were looking at necessarily, I don't think, because the ref then said he did not possess the ball all the way through, which the angle, and there was a nice camera angle of it real close on the side, where the ball, you know, it's okay to hit the ground as long as you have control of it. I think that's what they're saying. Maybe he didn't have control. It was tight. I didn't have a huge issue with that. I would have liked it if they said, well, we can't really tell and given them the ball because they settled for 3 points. And on the ensuing drive, AJ Brown does break one, gets it to about the 23. Throw to Gainwell. There wasn't as much time. There was about 9 seconds left. They called it with 4. And here's why I'm not going to kill Sirianni over that anymore. You're at the 17-yard line with no timeouts left, 10 seconds. So you have to heave it into the end zone, because if you get closer on a sideline play, well, then you have one play to kick a field goal or not, and you probably take 3 there because you want points. Otherwise, they have to, you drop back, you're at the 25-yard line. That's a long throw into the end zone, which anything could happen. It's not like they were at the 5 and it's a quick hit, a quick slant. I can see where he's playing the odds, playing the percentages and KC's going to drop everyone back, keep everything inside, and play the goal line. So I don't have a problem with them kicking the field goal there. And on the Goddard play, which was, I don't even know why Hurts threw that ball, phenomenal throw. I did think it was a catch by Goddard. KC had an opportunity to review it, because initially the Eagles snapped the ball. The ref said, everyone thought there was a challenge, but there was actually a substitution on the sideline that they didn't apparently give KC enough time to substitute. So that gave Andy Reid more time to throw the flag. I mean, a lot of little things kind of, I was out of my mind when that happened, but they gave it back to Goddard, and I thought that was a catch. I'm watching at the Sue illegal face mask. It really wasn't. He had his jersey. It wasn't under his face mask. That was not an accurate call. So, again, great game. Jonathan Gannon's defense, and you brought this up a long time ago. Did they play anyone? Not really. Maybe the easiest schedule in the league. It turned out there were a lot of injuries for quarterbacks that they played, or subpar quarterbacks. But when they did play good quarterbacks this year, they gave up a lot of points. Aaron Rodgers, they won 40. They scored 40 against Green Bay, but won 40-33. Dak put up 40 something on Christmas Eve against them. San Fran had no quarterback, and Daniel Jones turned out to be kind of what we thought he was. Although he did have a good game against Minnesota, but it was Minnesota's defense. They lost their defensive coordinator a few days after that game. So I go back to last year. In the losses, they had 7 of the 9. Dak put up 41 and 51. Justin Herbert put up 27 against them. Derek Carr 33, and I think his completion percentage was 93% in that game. Brady 28 and 31 in the playoff game. And Mahomes 42 last year. So, and I'll give a lot of credit to Kansas City. They came back from 10 against Frisco. 10 points is not a lot for Kansas City to come back from. Historically, in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, they were down 10 with 7 minutes left. They won by 11. They were down 24 points to the Texans a few years ago. If you remember that playoff game, they covered. They won like 51-20 to 28 or 31, something like that. They actually covered that game. Score a lot at will. Although I do think, look, I'm watching it, Schuster complain about the refs right here on TV. And I thought they outcoached. They had those little rip routes, the rip motion routes where, they send the wide receivers in motion and then quickly dart back out and confuse the Eagles. And then Jonathan Gannon, I think, much to the glory and praise in this town, stays behind, and the Arizona Cardinals, and this, to me, to be honest, is why Arizona is where they are and, haven't won anything ever. They hire a guy who, again, their defense put up nice numbers this year. But did they really? I mean, 78 sacks is 78 sacks. But when they faced really good quarterback play, they gave up a lot of points, and I thought they got embarrassed in the second half. He gets a job with the Cardinals. How's that meeting go? How awkward's that meeting on Monday morning? So Coach, how'd you do Sunday? His answer, my friend wrote that, which half?
Well, but not to defend him, but the Chiefs offense really only scored 21 points.
I know. The punt return.
The fumble, and the punt return was to the 5-yard line. So you can at least make a case they did a good job, but it's true. They got run over in the second half. That's true. But again, they didn't have that chance to maybe pull it out at the end And I just thought that was very disappointing.
Very disappointing. So, those are my thoughts. I'll close the book on Super Bowl 57, maybe never watch the tape again. Although I want to see Butker's kick, only because I was right behind. I'm looking for myself there. Looking to see if I got any airtime in the Super Bowl. So let's talk about then the aftermath, because the Eagles, they have a lot of free agents on that roster. Of the 22 starters, I think 11 might be a little high, and some of them I'm okay with. I think it's maybe time, and then there's some that I would love to see them bring back. Problem is they're going to have to pay Jalen. Now, whether Jalen does the Tom Brady and says, let's make this work a little bit, and I don't know, hometown discount, or maybe amortize it differently. I'm not sure. Howie's great at that. Howie's great at, fudging the numbers, let's say, but they have that issue. And they lost both coordinators. Shane Steichen goes to the Colts, and I liked him. I love what he did this year. I mean, you can't say almost anything negative. Jalen Hurts went from a guy who I said no on to a transformation into a franchise quarterback of the real elite level, probably the best player in the game in the Super Bowl, probably runner. Maybe you could make an argument that he was the MVP this year. Missed a couple games, although I thought that should have boosted his stock because they look terrible without him, right? So, except for the one fumble, and again, it did cost him when you weigh each side. That was a critical mistake that cost them the game. But so they're going to have to finagle that. But they lost Shane Steichen, who I thought was great this year, and I love the play calling for the most part. And they lost their defensive coordinator, which I'm okay with. I just didn't like his philosophy in terms of bringing guys or any adjustments he was making against real good quarterbacks. Steve Spagnuolo, I don't know how great he is. He gave up 35 points straight up in the Super Bowl. Got blown out by Tom Brady a couple years ago, albeit he had really no offensive line. He's won 3, did a nice job, taking down the Death Star and Tom Brady that year. They were 18-0 going into that game, a lot of pressure up the middle, and I like what he did. But so they have to rebuild with their coordinators and some free agent signings and be creative with the cap. Your thoughts on losing both those guys, and are you okay if you're an Eagle fan losing Jonathan Gannon? Because I think this town wanted to have a parade for that reason.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on all that. The thing I'll say that I think is really, really important, and you'll tell me if he's a free agent or he's under contract, but it's whether Kelsey comes back or not. Kelsey is the glue to the whole offense.
It's up to him. He can retire if he wants or come back, but I agree with that. Glue to the whole offense.
I would think if he thinks they have a shot to win the Super Bowl next year, which they do, I would think he would come back for one more. But you don't know all the years banging heads. You got to be a little worried. I think everybody now doesn't make the decision because of it, but considers as part of the decision, am I going to be okay 20 years from now? People never thought about that before in the past. Even people today will say, oh, I don't care if I lose my mind when I'm 60. I want to play in the NFL now. But I'm sure Kelsey has a ton of money. He's got a Super Bowl. But I would think if he thinks he has a chance to win it next year with this quarterback, I would think he comes back. And as for Jalen Hurts, what you were talking about, he kind of seems like the kind of guy that would give up some for his team. But he might also be thinking Patrick Mahomes is making what, 45, 50 million a year, and they won the Super Bowl. So that might be their problem. He doesn't strike me as a money grabber guy, and I know you're going to tell me Brady's wife makes as much or more than he did all those years. But the fact that Brady did what he did definitely helped them win those last 3 Super Bowls that they won before he went to Tampa Bay. I think Hurts might be that kind of guy. And frankly, if he's not, then I think they're going to lose a bunch of guys. And that's always the weakness after a Super Bowl. How many of those guys can you keep? But with the Chiefs, I think Mahomes is even just slightly, I think he's above Hurts. I think he stands by himself now. Don't tell me about Josh Allen. Don't tell me about Herbert when you compare him to this guy. I think he's above everybody, Joe, and I don't think that's going to change. Is he going to get to 7 Super Bowls? That I find hard to believe. But, they're already talking he's one of the 3 greatest of all time. And look, talent-wise, he probably is. But it really comes down to how many are you going to win? And the answer is still an open book, but we'll see. Aren't they the favorites for next year already? The Eagles
Yes.
are one of the favorites, but the Chiefs are the favorites. And I think a lot depends on if Kelsey stays and what Hurts does. If they lose an extra 2 guys because Hurts wants $50 million a year, I mean, Daniel Jones is probably wanting 35 or 40 million a year because they didn't pick up his 50-year option. He's a free agent.
Yep.
I don't think anybody outside is paying him 35 or 40 million a year. To me, the Giants are in like that in-between position. You got to pay this guy now. But how much? And how much is that going to hurt you because he's been on a rookie contract? So I think Kelsey's the key to the offensive line for sure. And I would say the offense and maybe even the team as a whole, they have enough pass rushes that maybe they could lose 1 or 2 and still be good. But I think Hurts and his salary might be the key to the whole thing. Plus, he'll be a hero if he comes out and says, I don't know, I'm only taking 40 instead of 50, or I'm only taking 35 instead of 45. We always say, how much do you need? But the answer is always, I need more.
Right. I mean, I need as much as you'll pay me, right?
But Brady was the one who broke that mold. But as you pointed out, his wife made 30, 35, 40 million a year when they were married. So money was never an object, but Brady did the right thing for a long time. And that's why he has 7, by the way. That is why. Even with Tampa Bay, I think he took 25, 20. And I know this is like stupid money we're talking about, but he still took a lot less. He was never in the top 5 quarterbacks. Whenever they put the numbers out, Brady was always like 10th or 12th or 8th. So I think Hurts might want to do that because he's got 10, 12 years in front of him. So we'll see what happens. But I think the Chiefs should be the favorites. And the Eagles are one of the best teams already. And you got to figure Hurts is only going to get better off of this. But you're right. We'll have to see who their OC is coming in.
Any chance? How do I pose this question? Because I don't, the answer to me is no. But the last time the Eagles went to a Super Bowl, they had a quarterback who probably would have been the MVP had he not missed some games. Now he's a perennial backup. And he's already the backup going into next year in Washington. His name is Carson Wentz. Even when he, let's say he was never actually really healthy, but even in the subsequent years after the Super Bowl, he lost his offensive coordinator that year. After that year, John DeFilippo, never was the same. And not only that, he got really bad. In fact, a lot of folks don't see him ever getting a starting job again in Carson Wentz. Any chance Jalen Hurts is a one-hit wonder?
I don't think so, because he really is that double threat, which I understand is now the wave of the future, and the future is now. These guys, the Mahomes runs, bad ankle or not, the Mahomes runs were the key to that. You can argue to the whole game, but certainly that final drive, he's the one who ran that 23 yards up the middle or whatever that was. And I think the future is more about dual threat quarterbacks, which Carson Wentz really wasn't. Could he run a little bit? Yes. But you have the guys like Lamar Jackson, those kinds of guys. Where is Kyler Murray, though? That's a good question. Is Kyler Murray a one-hit wonder? And your guy is going to Arizona. They said we have an elite quarterback. They put up his record. And Kyler Murray, I think he's like 25-31 or something. So I'm not sure how elite he is. But I do think nowadays, I don't know that you'll see another Brady standing in the pocket, pretty unathletic. I don't know if you'll see guys like this coming forward in the future. Everybody sees, all the young guys seem to have that ability. Daniel Jones can run. Purdy could run a little. You need a little athleticism, and I think that's the wave of the future. And again, the future is now.
Let's talk about Eric Bieniemy a little bit. I know a lot of folks were not happy. The African-American variety, that he didn't, he wasn't hired right away. He's an offensive coordinator who's won 2 Super Bowls in the last 5 years, while Jonathan Gannon gets shredded, stays in Arizona, gets a gig. Shane Steichen, I think Shane Steichen was maybe a good hire. I don't always believe, in fact, I don't believe necessarily at all that just because you're a good coordinator, you can be a good head coach. You got to be a leader of men. You got to be a CEO. It's a lot different than just bringing your style. Shane Steichen's a great offensive coordinator. You know what? I'd like him to be my offensive coordinator. I don't know if he can be a leader of men. Can Jonathan Gannon? I know his players really liked him. The Chargers really liked their coach, and I think he should have been whacked. So Eric Bieniemy, gets a job with the Washington Commanders, but you look at it and it looks like it's almost a lateral move. He's their offensive coordinator under Ron Rivera, but in Kansas City, he wasn't the play caller, really. I mean, he might have, been an assistant to the designs and whatnot, but Andy Reid, he's a control freak. He runs a show and did a nice job and does a nice job. He's a good offensive guy, good offensive mind, good offensive play designer. So Eric Bieniemy now runs the show, I guess. That's probably part of his deal. He's going to call the plays, but what do you think about that move for Eric Bieniemy? It's, again, going from an offensive coordinator to an offensive coordinator, whereas Doug Peterson, you look at some of Andy's past offensive coordinator. Doug Peterson was an offensive coordinator, kind of the same in name only, and went to the Eagles, won a Super Bowl, got Jacksonville out of the Urban Meyer disaster, got them to a playoff game, lost to the Chiefs only by 7. So your thoughts on that move for Eric Bieniemy?
Well, the difference to me is Peterson's white and Bieniemy's black. I mean, they don't, they talk a little about it, but I will say, if you're looking for an excuse, that's a good excuse. Andy Reid is the guy who runs the show offensively. So I think he's felt the pressure, and maybe he's even been told, look, we can't hire you. I mean, Andy Reid is your offensive coordinator. You don't really call the plays. But I do think this. I don't know if the Commanders is the right place. I'm going to read you these stats. So he's been the offensive coordinator for 5 years at Kansas City, okay? In those 5 years, I'm going to give you what the Chiefs are and what the Commanders are with these categories, ESPN. Points per game, Chiefs number 1, Washington number 30. Yards per game, Chiefs number 1, Washington number 31. Yards per play, Chiefs number 1, Washington 31. Total QBR, Chiefs number 1, Washington 31. So the first question you have to ask to me if you're an offensive coordinator is what? Who's your quarterback?
Quarterback.
Who's their quarterback? We kind of like you and I. We kind of like Heineke. Carson Wentz is there, but who is Carson Wentz now? He does look like the eternal backup. So this guy, to me, is really gambling. And I think what that means, Joe, is you would have liked to have seen if it was going to happen, and I don't think it is now, if Andy Reid would have said to Bieniemy right now, if he said, I'm only going to coach 1 year, maybe 2 tops, and then it's you, I think he would have stayed. I don't know if they ever had that conversation, because it seems to me now like Andy Reid's going to coach another 5 years if he can. Why? Because he's got one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And the arrow is only pointing up for him. Can they keep the team together? This isn't the Steelers of the 70s, where they kept that whole team together. If you look at those 4 Super Bowl winners, and that's how it was back then. Mm-hmm. But now the way football is today, with the salary cap or the limit, whatever, it's very, very hard to do. They lost Tyreek Hill and they were going to be terrible. Well, that was ridiculous because you got Mahomes and you got Kelsey. But I think Bieniemy is really gambling, but I think he feels the pressure. I think he wants to be a coach. And I guess the question is this: suppose he moves them from, 31st to, let's say, 16th. That would be a massive improvement. But is it an improvement enough for someone to say, oh, okay? Or are they going to say, well, look, you were 16th. And what's he going to say? Look at the quarterbacks I had. I mean, they got some players. They got some offensive players. But I don't know that he's going from 31 to top 6. Or whatever you think the number would be, Joe, that would make you a better candidate.
Right.
Because the reality is, whatever anyone says, he's still a black guy looking for a job, right? And they only hired one coach, right? This year, the guy from the 49ers. And I'm glad that Steve Wilkes, who should have got the Panthers job, at least he's going to be the DC of the 49ers. And that should give him a chance to get some next year, because the 49ers have a great defense. That should be a chance for him to be a quarterback, for him to be a head coach in the NFL. But there's always the elephant in the room that very few people want to talk about, and that these guys are black guys and they find it harder. What is the difference between Doug Peterson and Bieniemy? What's the difference from a coaching offensive coordinator of the Chiefs perspective? There is no difference. So I feel bad for him, but I'll say it again. I think because all Andy Reid is doing is pitching for him, right? He did a great job. He deserves an opportunity, but he obviously would not go to him and say, I'm only going to be here 1 more year, or I'm only going to be here even 2 more years. If you're Bieniemy, you would wait 2 years to have Patrick Mahomes for 10 years.
Mhm.
100%. And the only question is if that ends 1 or 2 or 3 years from now, and Andy Reid does retire, will Bieniemy be a candidate for that job? And the answer is we'll find out. But he might fall off the map now if he goes to Washington and they finish 25th in offense. But I'll say it again. Who's his quarterback?
Sam Howell. Sam Howell was a 5th-round pick out of Carolina last year.
You can tell me whoever it is. You can tell
Carson.
me Sam Howell or Heineke or Carson Wentz. That doesn't matter. Can they get Derek Carr? Will they try for Derek Carr? Would they throw away the money and get Aaron Rodgers for 2 years? I don't know. David Carr went and visited the Jets. People think the Jets are a Super Bowl team with a quarterback. I'm not one of them,
No.
but they're a very good team with a quarterback. Very good team. But I feel bad for Bieniemy. He should have gotten the job by now. He should have gotten the chance. And I think it's sad. And I think it's mainly because you have the excuse now. You have the, oh, yeah, but the Chiefs, I mean, Andy Reid was the guy. That is an excuse and not a bad one. But you go to Peterson, how long was he the OC there? 2 years?
If that.
So he got a job. Now he won a Super Bowl. Now he's Peterson, and he turned around the Jaguars. You got to give him credit for that. He was one of the Coach of the Year nominees.
Yep.
By the way, I don't know why Sirianni wasn't the Coach of the Year nominee. He should have been. That's a joke. And Dable got Coach of the Year, and he's a real good coach. He turned the Giants around. They were 9-7-1. Peterson was 9-8. I understand these guys won no games last year, but I think Hurts was the MVP. I'm not an Eagles guy, but I think Hurts was the MVP because of what you said. He couldn't play. They lost 2 games. He had to come back to beat the Giants to make sure that they got the bye, and then they destroyed the Giants again.
Yes.
Destroyed them 2 out of 3 times. So I think it's unfair, but these are the things that happen. I think Hurts was the MVP. Why? Because he was the most valuable quarterback. You can argue that Mahomes was the most outstanding player. We always talk about this in like baseball or basketball, not usually in football, but Mahomes was the most outstanding player. Was he the MVP? I don't know. Hurts was what, 16-1 before the Super Bowl, or even 14-1 during the regular season, and they were 14-3. They put up the records before they had the same record. Well, hold it now. Hurts was 14-1.
Yes.
Mahomes was 14-3. That's a difference when you lose the other 2 games.
That's
so,
true.
and by the way, Mahomes got 48 out of 50 votes, the first place votes, which I thought was a joke. But people vote. It happens in baseball all the time, right? Avery, Dawson on the Cubs. You go back to Ernie Banks. Ernie Banks won it back-to-back years. They finished like 6th in an 8-team league both years. Was he the best player in baseball? Absolutely. Was he the MVP? Give me a break. But that happens in baseball, and that happens a lot. I think this year they gave it to the most outstanding player. Mahomes, he led the league in touchdown passes. He led the league in yards passing. That makes you the most outstanding quarterback, and it made him the MVP.
Just a comment, and you might have seen me. I was trying to because the play came on that you had talked about in that Super Bowl. The Juju hold earlier in the game that he went nuts on was much more blatant. It was more blatant than that penalty down in the end. That could have given him a first down, but he did turn him around, and he grabbed his left hand, did Bradbury, and turned him around again and tugged on his jersey. A different player tugged on a jersey of number 11, I think, going across the top. Happens all over the place. Yeah,
well, the only thing I can tell you is next year Bradbury will be wearing white gloves if he's playing a team that has white jerseys.
Yes, and he might not be an Eagle Green either because he's probably going to ask for a lot of money. I don't know how they're going to do it, but Howie is a genius with all that stuff. And I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually feeling okay that Howie's in charge these days because I like what he did last year. I used to kill him. All right, we'll get to other sports, when things happen down the road. This is mostly a recap, final thoughts on the Super Bowl, but you have an Antoine Davis thing you wanted to mention.
Antoine Davis, very few people know who he is. Antoine Davis plays D1 college basketball for Detroit Mercy. And he plays
Vitale's old school, by the way.
He plays in the Horizon League. Okay. think he's leading the nation in scoring this year, but the big headline just came up in the last few days. The big headline is he's about to beat Pete Maravich's unbeatable all-time D1 college scoring record. He has 4 games left. He has to average 39 a game, which I think they're just going to give him the ball until he does. So immediately what comes to your mind was the first thing. Well, Maravich, he did these 3,000, I don't even know how many points it is. It's stupid numbers like 3,600 points or 37. He did it in 3 years, right? And what do you say to yourself automatically? Well, this guy's doing it in 4 years, right? And that's a joke, right? Here's a news flash, Joe. And I just looked this up today because I had to. This guy got an extra year because of COVID. He's playing 5 varsity seasons, and he might break Pete Maravich's record playing 5 years, not 4, 5. Now, we throw in the no three-point line when Maravich played. There's a book about Maravich that came out years and years ago called Showtime, which is probably misnamed because of the Lakers, but it was called Showtime. And the guy went through every film of Maravich's 3-year varsity career, and he estimated that Maravich, instead of averaging 44 a game, which he did all 3 years, 0.2, 0.6, whatever, that he would have averaged 8 threes a game, 52 points a game. But I assure you, if there was a three-point line in college when Pete Maravich played, he would have been taking 15 threes a game. So it's so, and people are already justifying it. Well, he's going to break the record. Not 4 years, 5 years. So no three-point line. Not 4 years, 5 years. And now it's going to be the biggest story in the world for the next few weeks. And when he breaks the record, they'll stop the game. And I mean, can you give him a 6th year? I mean, how stupid is that, Joe? I'm sorry. I had not heard of this until yesterday. And I know I didn't tell you before this, but okay, the guy's a great scorer. Okay. Don't even think about comparing him to Pete Maravich.
Ridiculous. Just that's absolutely ridiculous. And we want to finally close on, unfortunately, sad note, one of my guys from back in the day, Tim McCarver, former Philly great. I think he played in 4 or 5 decades, baseball.
Yeah,
4 decades. Was also a longtime analyst with Joe Buck, covering Major League Baseball. I worked some World Series with him back in 08 and 09. Good dude, nice man. He passed away, I believe, at the age of 81, 82 this year. Tim McCarver was Steve Carlton's catcher when he was here with the Phillies. Bob Boone was the regular catcher, but when Carlton pitched, he was all number 11.
Very good baseball player, underrated. Came in second in 1967 for the MVP. Orlando Cepeda, who was on his team, won the MVP, which is pretty interesting, right? You have the 1-2 MVP guys on the same team. But smart guy, excellent defensive catcher, caught 2 incredible Hall of Famers, right? First, Bob Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
And he was Bob Gibson's catcher when Gibson had that 1.12 ERA, 1968, the year of the pitcher. They lowered the mound after that, which contributed to the new offense starting in 1969. I can tell you in the 64 World Series against the Yankees, a 7-game World Series, he hit 478. Tim McCarver hit 478, hit a 3-run homer in extra innings in game 5 to beat the Yankees. Was also Gibson's catcher in 1968, game 1. You can still even see this on TV sometimes. Gibson struck out 17 guys, to this day, the World Series strikeout record, and McCarver was the catcher. He eventually winds up with Philly. You probably know that McCarver had played with Carlton in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Carlton had pitched in St. Louis, so they knew each other. And he was getting older, but he wound up becoming Carlton's personal catcher. You're right. Bob Boone caught all the other games, but McCarver coached Carlton. And I'll ask you this question because I had to look this up. So when Tim McCarver caught Steve Carlton as a Philly, these things are hard to find. I couldn't find his record with Gibson except to tell you it's great. But Steve Carlton, with Tim McCarver catching, he had 126 decisions. And as you know, he was on some bad Phillies teams, but there were 126 decisions when McCarver was Carlton's personal catcher. What do you think his record was with a Cardinal team that was not like all the other Cardinal teams? You know, we're always in the World Series, we're always in the playoffs.
126 in terms of decisions.
Yes.
I'll say 80 wait. 10, 6, that's 8. Oh, right, 120. Then 82 and 44.
Really? You just guessed that? You can't look this up. I found it.
Look it up. I'm doing some numbers.
I didn't find it in the stat book. I found it in an article. It was like an aside in an article. He was actually 81 and 45. It's just pretty incredible that you could guess that.
Okay, I was close.
But I do want to focus just briefly on McCarver. McCarver became a Hall of Fame. You know, that Ford Frick Award they give out by the Hall of Fame to the best announcer. He got that award in 2012. And he was much higher, you know, 24 World Series, many of them with Joe Buck. He was a great announcer and had perhaps the greatest prediction in the history of not just baseball, but of commentators, expert commentators in any sport, in any game. Game 7, 2001 World Series, Luis Gonzalez getting up against Mariano Rivera. The Yankees bring the infield in, 1 out, 1st and 3rd. Are they going to play back and play for the double play? Or are they going to come in and, you know, make sure they cut the run off at home? And Tim McCarver said, I wish I had the exact quote. I should have. You know what? Just give me 1 sec, Joe. I thought I saw it in an article. I can tell you what he said, but I'd much rather give you the exact quote. And here it is. With the count 0-1, again, Rivera pitching to Luis Gonzalez, 1st and 3rd, 1 out, tie game, bottom of the 9th. Here's what McCarver said, quote, "The one problem is Mariano Rivera throws inside to left-handers." Luis Gonzalez, of course, a left-handed batter. Quote, "Left-handers get a lot of broken bat hits into the shallow outfield, the shallow part of the outfield. That's the danger of bringing the infield in with a guy like Rivera on the mound." And the next pitch, it was a little inside. They say here it was right on the inside corner. It was a little inside. I just watched the replay. And he hit a bloop that landed 1 foot beyond the dirt of the infield at shortstop. If they were back, Jeter would have caught it, no problem. But he was up. The ball drops. One of the greatest World Series ever, and the Yankees lost.
Yeah.
But that's the greatest prediction in the history of sports, I think. I'd love it if anybody has another one, please tell me, because I'll mention it on this show and we'll go find it. But I don't think you could call, and the timing was the next pitch, and that's exactly what happened.
Good stuff.
So McCarver was a great announcer, you know, announced for decades, Yankees, Mets, bunch of other things, National, 24 World Series, and again, was recognized with the Ford Frick Award for announcers. That's like getting into the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame. So he'll be sorely missed, very bright. You know, took a lot of criticism. Deion Sanders threw that bucket of water or something on him last time.
Yeah.
And McCarver was cool. He goes, "Oh, you're a real man, Deion. You're a real." I thought he handled it well.
Yeah.
Did he overanalyze sometimes? Well, I think everybody overanalyzes sometimes. But this guy, again, a catcher, and you know what? The catchers make the best guys. I mean, they do. They make the best analysts.
The captains of the field, sure.
Right, and they always have the game in front of them. You know who's the only guy who has the whole field in front and all the players on the field. That's the catcher. Usually the catchers, you know, they're usually the smarter guys and often become managers. You know, you go back to Yogi Berra as a manager.
Mm-hmm.
So sad, but you know, 81 years old, brilliant guy, great announcer, very good baseball player. Don't underestimate him as a baseball player. Understand he wasn't a superstar, but a solid guy, and was in those 3 World Series, all of which went to Game 7. They won 2 out of 3. They lost to the Tigers in '68, the year Gibson set that strikeout record that still stands. But he'll be missed. But again, wrote a bunch of books. I've read a couple of them, good books. You know, baseball. If you're into really baseball and following the game, You should get some of those Tim McCarver books because a couple of them are classics.
I used to wear, I don't know why there was even a Tim McCarver jersey back then at the Phillies, because he pitched, he played when I watched, every 5 games. But it was like T-shirt with a thing McCarver on it. I used to wear it all the time. It wasn't like I requested it. Maybe it was just there. Yeah, Tim McCarver. It was a McCarver. I told him that at the 08 World Series. You got a kick out of it, that I used to sleep in it, play in it. I wore all the time. And still, he wasn't like my guy. Bob Boone was my guy, but I had a McCarver jersey. Anyway, good stuff, my friend. You can catch Steve and our act on YouTube every week. Also, Steve's Facebook forum page, Speaking of Sports, with Steve Kallas. Also on my Facebook page. It'll be up shortly. We're taping this on Saturday morning, February 18th. You can also check out Steve's videos, westchestercountypost.com. Always get that messed up. And also on YouTube. And you can check out our stuff on YouTube, like I said, on Apple and Spotify weekly. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Staszak 975 or on Instagram at Joe Staszak 4799. Great stuff, Steven. Great year, great football season. Came up a buck short for my squad, but now we can get into free agency, and the new NFL year starts up. It's all that boring stuff before camp kicks off, next July. Good stuff, my friend.
Always a pleasure, Joe.
You too, pal. Appreciate you watching, folks, and we will catch you next week. Good night, good football.